Hi, I can count.
Oh, yours is on now.
All right, testing, testing.
Testing, testing.
They're still talking, but
I think we can get started now, though.
Okay.
All right, I'll start over for the benefit of those online. So good morning. Thank you for all staying this morning. So Pastor Rollie is here from our synod, and he's going to talk a little bit about the policy that we put in place, we as council put in place toward the end of last summer about employees not being on council or on the call committee. So we're just hoping this morning for this to be an information session. Pastor Rollie is going to do some presenting, and he's open to taking questions. So we're just hoping that we get some good information. We have a good dialogue about this morning. So welcome, and thanks for driving down this morning.
thank you, Karen. Oops. Testing, testing. All right. I'd like to be able to hear my own voice, so it's like, as Karen said, I'm Rollie Bachbreder. I am a member of Bishop Amy's staff. The office is in Duluth. I happen to be the office person. So I'm the one that stays in the office, opens the mail. I'm the bookkeeper, so I do that whole bit. But I'm also involved with what we call congregational care. So questions that come up in a congregation that do not relate to first call, candidacy, call process, stewardship. There's probably we have other people on staff that do that, although I have done those sorts of things in the past with previous bishops. Karen and I think we started this conversation mid-January. I mean, it was in January to get me here. There might have been some previous conversations, but, and it didn't work out with my schedule, the schedule here, Karen's schedule, but I am here today. A little bit about me. My wife and I live in Esco. Esco is halfway between Cloquet and Duluth. Tracy is a middle school, high school science teacher in Carlton, just outside of Cloquet. We have 2 adult children, a son who works for KSTP TV down in the cities, and then our daughter was just ordained an ELCA pastor last August. She is serving on staff in a church just outside of Cincinnati, Ohio. So Dad's really proud. Tracy's proud too, but anyway. I wear a number of hats. I listed a few of them. I'm also the Constitution person for our synod. So anything Constitution-wise goes through me. And yesterday I was looking at the last time I reviewed a Constitution for Faith in Isle. Any guesses? Oh, really close. It was 95. I think it was 1991. Oh, wow. I read that. I go, oh, my God. I hope they've updated it and just not let me know. I would encourage you, not now, not this summer, but this fall, to take a look at your Constitution. The reason to wait till this fall is we have a church-wide assembly, ELCA church-wide assembly in July, August. They have always passed new amendments to the model constitution for congregations, for the synod, for the ELCA. So you don't want to do a whole lot of work now and then have me tell you, oh, you better put these in also. So, but be aware, I think your constitution is out of date. It's at least post 1988, which is the time of the merger. But the question that Karen and I have been talking about, is it okay for a church staff member to be a voting member of the congregation council? Constitutionally, it's called congregation council. You all probably call it church council, right? I'll probably just call it council. Is it okay for a church staff member to be a voting member of the council? The model constitution has 4 chapters right in the middle that deal with congregational meetings, officers, church councils, and the fourth one is, I've drawn a blank, and I did not write that one down. But have to do with practical day-to-day operations. How do you elect the council? How do you elect officers? How often do they meet? How often does the annual meeting take place? That was an oxymoron, wasn't it? An annual meeting takes place once a year. But the chapter I want to focus on is chapter 12. The title is Congregation Council. 1201 defines the makeup of the council. It will include the pastor or deacon, the officers, and either a certain number or a range of numbers of non-officer members who are members of the congregation. So you're going to want to look at your constitution to say our council is supposed to be X number of people in total. I actually don't have a copy of your constitution, so I don't know if it's a range. Karen, do you know?
No, it's voting membership is the pastor and 12 members of the congregation.
And I would guess that the 12 members includes the 4 officers?
Yes.
Does the council elect the officers?
Yes.
Okay. There's some options in these chapters, and depending on what the local custom is, what the past practice is, what you want to do in the future. I get nervous with people behind me, but that's okay. Me neither. 1202 talks about the length of term. Are they 2 years, 3 years? Can a person be eligible for a second term, third term? Hopefully it doesn't say a lifetime term, because I don't think that's a good idea. Paragraph 3 talks about vacancies. If there's a vacancy on the council has the authority to appoint someone to fill that vacancy until the next annual meeting, when the congregation who elects council members they could elect that person or somebody else. 1204, this is a fun one if you're a council member, and if you haven't looked at 1204, it's your job description. I'm not going to read it, but it talks about the responsibilities you all carry out as council members. 1205 talks about the council being responsible for the financial and property matters of the church. 06, your job is to carry out the constitution of this congregation. 07, the council is to carry out an annual review of the roster or membership of the congregation. And the reason that's important is if you have a meeting coming up, who are eligible to vote? And the Constitution says voting members is a person who has communed in the prior 2 years, I'm paraphrasing it, and who is given a gift of record is the language. In the previous 2 years is a voting member, my term now, active member. Review of the roster. 1208 is the one I'm going to read because it addresses the question, is it okay for a church staff member to be a voting member of the council? 1208 reads, the council shall be responsible for the employment and supervision of the staff of this congregation. Nothing in this provision shall be deemed to affect this congregation's responsibility for the call, terms of call, or termination of call of any employee who is on the roster of the ELCA and the Synod. Who's on the roster of the ELCA and the Synod? Pastor Josh. I assume he's back there. I don't think there's any other rostered members here. I'm looking at Sue Liebeck. Sue's been a SAM, She's a layperson appointed by the bishop to do congregational ministry, but Sue's not rostered. First sentence again, it's the council, and you're not all on the council, but it's the council's responsibility to supervise lay staff. That's pretty clear. Council shall submit and a report to the congregation. Council shall normally meet monthly. Quorum, remote meetings. If your constitution is dated 1991, chances are it does not have the state provision that allows electronic meetings to take place. Karen, do you know, has that been done in the past?
So this has been adopted, the one I'm looking at, September 30 of 2018.
Is it like chapter
What are you looking for?
C 1008?
1008.
I think that's the electronic meeting. COVID,
No, we don't have a 1008 on this one.
all right, COVID, okay. COVID forced how we do some things in the church and in the world. One of which was opening up the door because our state permits organizations such as churches to have electronic meetings as long as the person on the other side of the camera can hear and can ask a question or speak to the meeting group. That took a little while for our synod the lawyer group with the ELCA, they were working night and day because lockdown took place, was it March, I think, of that year? We were scheduled to have a bishop election in May of that year. State said no open meetings, no lock in place. So we had to do some things so that we could elect a bishop, have a meeting. Congregations often followed suit. Any questions with anything I presented before I go on to? 12, okay. I was in the wrong chapter.
No, 12, 13.
And just and this is not a slap on the hand, but it's going to sound like it. Something like that, well, maybe you did run it by me or somebody, whoever's a past president. That's something I would say should come by my eyes so I could say, yes, you have synod approval. The synod has the responsibility of okaying your constitutions. It is rare for me to say, no, I won't accept it, but rather I'll say, take a look at these couple points. This one might be in conflict. This one might need some clarification. I've had one where there were no officers for the church, and that's a no-no according to the state of Minnesota. Every organization needs to have at least 3 officers. I just glanced at Doug Jacobson, and Doug is an expert at nonprofit organizations. So I better not look at Doug here much. All right, let me go on. So the first question, can a church staff member serve on council? The answer is technically yes. According to the model constitution, the Constitution does not prohibit this situation, but it also does not support or encourage the situation. The paragraph that says who's on the council, it shall be the pastor, the officers, and you said 12 total on council?
12 plus the pastor.
The model constitution continues to suggest there shall be a youth member on council, there shall be a young adult member of council. That is not always present in constitutions of the local congregation. One reason is it hasn't been added into your constitution. Another is, we don't have young people. Oh, my gosh, we got young people here. It's meant to be an encouragement to include people of all age ranges. Typically, on the low end would be confirmed. Confirmed members have the opportunity to vote and speak at meetings of the congregation. Now, I'm going to do a sidetrack here a little bit. 70% of the model constitution has what's called an asterisk, meaning required provision. The statement of faith is asterisk. If you were to say, we want to amend the statement of faith to, we don't believe in Jesus, you run it by me, I'm going to say, no, not acceptable, because it's required and it's anti-Christian. 70% is required language, which means you better have a really, really, really good reason why you want to go different from the language that's required. These 4 chapters that I mentioned do not have the asterisk. When the model constitution was set up in 1987, the leadership realized that every congregation might have a different way of running councils, electing people. And so the model constitution puts in some options, A, B, C, that sort of thing. Council makeup is one of those not required, but recommended language. So even though the model constitution doesn't say, yes, you should have this staff person on, or no, you should not, that's going to be up to the local congregation to say, this is a good thing, this is not a good thing. So apart from the Constitution, I'm going to ask the question, what are the dangers of a church staff member being on council? First, Pastor Josh, he is called by the congregation. He has a different role than a lay staff person. He's called to be your pastor, to preside over the sacraments, to teach, to preach, to lead worship. They're a special category, right? Pastor special? Okay, sorry. So, even though not every congregation allows the pastor to have a voice and vote on the council, that option is present, that if it makes sense for the pastor to be on the council, you have the pastor on the council. My strong recommendation is, because of the pastor who he or she is, it's important to have them present on council with voice and vote. Lay staff members. Well, let me back up. There actually are a couple of congregations who follow an old model practice where the pastor is the ex officio president of the congregation. Now, Karen, we want him to be pastor, not the president. There are some congregations that allow the pastor to have voice on council, but not vote. Again, my personal and professional recommendation is they should have voice and vote. So, lay staff members on council, good, bad, both. One of the main potential dangers is a conflict of interest. Who has the oversight of the lay employees? This is a pop quiz every now and then, you know. Who oversees the lay employees? Council. If a lay staff member is also on council, is that person a staff member? Are they an employee? Are they the employer? The potential for conflict of interest there is one that I would probably encourage staying away from. I've served in a couple of different parishes. When the council got around to talking about my salary, I said, I'm going to excuse myself. They said, oh, you don't have to. I said, yes, I'm going to, so that you can talk about me without me being there. Personnel matters become a little bit tricky. I've worked with some great parish secretaries in the past who, once they got to know me, were not afraid to tell me, we got to look at this. They were, this is an important issue. Let's do something about it. And my response will be, I will bring it up at the next council meeting. If it's that important, we'll do that. And if it makes sense for you to be at that meeting also, we'll do that. Now, I ran this question, this is back in early February, with the ELCA legal counsel. His name is Tom Cunoff, and the ELCA secretary, Sue Rothmeyer. And Tom sent back a model operational ethics policy. And so I'm reading through that, I go, what does this have to do with anything? But I found a paragraph, it's actually the second paragraph, which tells you I skipped over the initial read. And this is, again, I'll read verbatim. No congregational representative, and by congregational representative, it says council member, officers, committee member, employee, no representative shall use his or her position or knowledge gained therefrom so as to create a conflict or the appearance of a conflict between the interests of the congregation or any affiliated entity and the other interests of such congregational representative. In all matters affecting the congregation or any affiliate, you can tell this is written by an attorney, or any affiliated entity, no congregation representative shall take any position or engage in any act that could adversely affect the congregation or any affiliated entity. Basically, this ethics policy in this paragraph is saying you got to be careful if you hold a church position, whether it's pastor, deacon, lay, you have power and authority, and you've got to be careful how you use that authority and power, especially inside the church with others. Karen, I think this could be a good document for the council to look at, or at least have available, that ethics policy. Personal experience. Church staff wear a variety of hats. Adding the hat of a council member to a church staff person, it's one more thing that he or she will be needing to think about. My wife and I worship at a church in Cloquet, annual meeting, first Sunday in February. The nominating committee was still looking for one or two more people for the council. So they opened it up to the floor. No hands, no hands. The parish administrator raised her hand and said, if nobody else will do it, I'll do it. I looked at the pastor, because she and I had talked about this possibility, and she just, and I go, okay. So I got up, went to the mic and said, it's my opinion, it's not a good idea, conflict of interest. This particular person, mother of 2 small children, her husband is a medical doctor, is a reservist, medical reserve military person, and she's going on to grad school this fall. So apart from her personal reasons, I focused on, it's not a good idea for you to be on council because are you the employee, the employer, both, that sort of thing. I did a little bit of research in the nonprofit world. because the ELC really didn't say a whole lot about this, but the nonprofit world, congregations are a part of the nonprofit world, very clear, no staff member of the organization should be on the board of directors. The CEO, there was mixed feelings whether the CEO could be on the board of directors or not. The job of the board of directors, and I'll translate the job of the church council, is to set the direction, the big picture. The job of staff is to carry out the board, the council's directives. Now, I've been talking for a long time, right? Yeah. Questions? Yes?
How do you figure a pastor should have a vote and a voice at a council meeting over anyone else? I just think that's conflict of interest just as much as it is if you're the secretary of the church.
The question was, what about the pastor? Should the pastor be allowed to have vote on council? Pretty close? Yeah. I'll just do a little segue there. Technically, anybody can have voice. Council meetings are to be open, and so if there's a guest, a visitor, and unless the council goes into executive session, which is a totally different thing, the chair can recognize guest so-and-so. So, the pastor, I think, needs to have a voice on council. The congregation has called Pastor, in this case, Josh Blair, to be the pastor of Faith Lutheran Church of Isle. 2/3 majority vote was necessary for that letter of call. 2/3. I mean, that's a super majority of the people at that meeting saying, we want Josh to be our pastor. And if you limit the pastor not having vote on council, the issue there is, are you telling the pastor they're not really that important?
So are you telling the secretary that she's not that important, she can't sit on the council?
I will say yes to that.
Repeat the question. I kind of feel the same way about having women on the board. I just think
The question is, okay, so if Pastor Rollie says the pastor should have vote, should not the church secretary have that same privilege of vote? And I said, no, because the secretary is a lay employee of the congregation, accountable to the council, and if she or he is on the council, member of the council, are you going to ask that council member to leave anytime there's an office situation that comes up? I'm going to say why.
Why then should the pastor not leave when there's going to be some discussion about him?
And I would think that the pastor could leave when they're
Could leave, but will not leave.
that's going to be a council decision.
Okay, I have something to say. You know, I was the administrative assistant for 18 plus years here at Maine. Many times. At a minimum of five times, I was asked to be on the council, practically begged. Reason being that they cited, you know everybody in the church. You know practically when they go to bed at night and when they get up in the morning. You care for all of the people on a personal basis. You, what else did I say? Had to write this all down. I was an authorized lay minister for many years while I was at church. They know that I heard things that came to the church. They just felt that because of my knowledge, I should sit on the council to let people know what's going on, if the pastor would not have ear to hear what was going on, and just be with the council. Having said that, I had so many things going on at church. I decided I didn't want to do it. personally, I decided I didn't want to do it. Then, nothing more. There was never, ever, ever a conflict. I was always in agreement with the pastor and the council and everything. A couple of years ago, things changed, and things got kind of ugly. And things got, anyway, then the council decided to put a policy, an employee policy. And the council was on the committee, and the administrative assistant, the pastor, and everything. And okay, they're going to have this personnel policy. Everything's fine yet. Spring of last year, there was a vacancy on the council, and the administrative assistant was asked by a council member to sit on the council. And no, I think I'll wait till the fall. I'm interested, I'll wait till the fall, and then I'll run for a full term. In the meantime, the policy was revised to say that nobody on the employed could be on the council. There was someone on the council that was also an employee with some part of her term left to go, and she was asked specifically if she was going to extend her term. She had already thought about this, and she said, no, I'm not. Wonderful. So then this policy got into effect that nobody could go. No employee could be on the council. My issue with this whole thing is, and it came up in the annual meeting, the council decided that this was going to be adopted, we were going to have this employee policy, and they went against the Constitution. Then I heard word that the Synod had said that the Constitution of Faith Lutheran Church that we adopted September 30th, 2018 was a recommendation. I'm sorry to tell you, it is not a recommendation from the Synod. It is the governing body of Faith Lutheran Church. Now, having said that, if the congregation should decide, and I could care less, because the administrative assistant had been fired, it's not an issue anymore with her. Had the congregation wanted to change it to not have employees, and she could also be on the call committee, because voting members, they need to do it by how the Constitution says. Call a special meeting of the congregation to address that particular issue. If you want to change your Constitution, change it. But don't, in the middle of the stream, say that this can't happen. So that's my big issue with this whole thing. Don't try to override the Constitution. I don't feel that it's lawful.
Okay, thank you. One statement that I do disagree, the Synod does not control the congregation. We are an umbrella. We are in partnership with the 125 congregations in the Synod, just as the Synod and the ELCA are in partnership with those three entities.
I didn't mean to say you control.
That's what I heard, though.
Okay, I take that back, Nancy. That's what you heard. What I meant to say is the Synod said the Constitution is merely a guideline for the church. That's what was told.
Okay, and that's true with the exception of the 70% asterisk required language. And that's language that if we want to have fellowship with other ELCA congregations, those required languages line up from church to church so that if I take a call in Timbuktu, I have a pretty good idea that if I'm going to an ELCA congregation, what the governance looks like.
But being on the council is not pastoral.
That is correct. So it's a congregation decision of those recommended but not required provisions in the Constitution.
So would you not agree that if they prohibit someone, it's going against the Constitution?
I would say the option is there that it can be added to the Constitution that prohibits this person in this position.
But it should be added to the Constitution. Do you agree with that?
It could be added to it. Now, you talked about the employer policy that was adopted. When was that? That was,
Shortly before the annual meeting, I guess.
okay. And it was adopted by who?
I don't really know the document.
The end of the summer.
Okay. And the council has the authority and responsibility between meetings of the congregation to set policy. So that action is appropriate. If you want to make it a part of the Constitution, it could be a Constitution provision which would require congregation action. It could be a bylaw change. Again, that's a congregation decision. It can be a continuing resolution. Most of the actions that take place on the council level are continuing resolutions. They don't have the authority, the weight of the congregation saying, this is what we want. So it is possible to have the employee policy brought to the congregation, made a part of the Constitution.
Would that employee policy override what's stated in the Constitution? That any voting member, that's paid their money and community, can sit on the council?
I'm going to say the employee policy, I got to look at my notes here to make sure I say the right thing. The employee policy, because it's been put in place by the council, modifies the Constitution. Because I said earlier, the Constitution does not say yes or no to a staff member serving on council. It says anyone. And so maybe the congregation wants to say, it's not a good idea to have this. And the congregation should vote on that. Now I got to look at Karen. If I said anything that has happened or not happened,
No, I don't think so. When we put the policy in place, there was no policy about employees when I came on
Okay.
council.
All right.
Alicia Hoberg came on council, I think about the same time I did, and she has an HR background. And when she started on council, she had a lot of questions about why
okay.
employees were on. And so the timing of that happened because Sue, who is our custodian, she was going off of council, and there was no one on the slate that was an employee. So Alicia brought it up at that time for us to
Okay.
talk about.
Okay.
So it's kind of in between.
So did you say that the congregation should approve that policy?
I said the congregation could approve that if that would make things clearer.
That would be better, I think.
Okay? Now, what's your first name? Carol? Carolyn, sorry. Thank you, Carolyn. One of the things you said 2 years ago there was a change.
2.5 years.
2.5 years ago there was a change.
We had a new spiritual leader.
Pastor Josh was called. All right. So when a pastor or a deacon is called, do you expect that person to operate the same way that has been done in the past 20 years?
He lives in Romania and he comes in Sunday and Wednesday. He has been in conflict with our secretary ever since he got here. And
All right.
he's out work Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday.
All right. This is a personnel policy that I don't want to get into. All right. Now, but I'm hearing conflict between pastor and employee. That then becomes a matter for the council to get involved. And if you don't like a decision this way or that way, that's where it begins to get tough for the individual or the family. Because this is going to sound really, really bad on my part, because I'm a bottom-up kind of person. The lay people of a congregation are the guts of a congregation, but the congregation has called your pastor to be spiritual leader, to be a leader. And if there's ever a time, let me back up. I don't know of any called pastor when there hasn't been changes made. It doesn't happen. I hate national politics. We have a change in president. Has there been changes? Yes. That's natural. Natural is not the right word. It's an outcome of decisions of the people. Same way in the congregation. You called Pastor Josh to be a leader. What does it mean to lead?
I think it means that you listen and you evaluate. You don't require your own way. You don't twist things around to make it be your way. And I have one more thing to say. We as the congregation, I got a lot of voice.
No, not for the people living in,
Alaska.
sure.
Faith as a congregation has has elected the council members, and we elect them to represent the congregation. And if we don't think that they're doing what they should be doing, they can be unelected at the next annual meeting. Same with Pastor Josh. If we don't feel that he's doing what we think he should do, he can be called to leave. So the congregation has a lot of power, and don't lose your power, because you do have a lot.
You can uncall a pastor. I've seen it happen twice in my 40-plus years. And I've been on bishop staffs with 3 different bishops, so I'm older than dirt.
You've done it a few times at Faith.
Yeah, yes, I have. To remove a pastor, there's a process. Because the pastor is a rostered minister of the Northeastern Minnesota Synod, that automatically involves the bishop. There will be a consultation process. Ultimately, if everything goes the way the people that are anti-pastor want it to go, it would require a 2/3 vote of the congregation. Now, my sense is you probably don't have 2/3 of the whole congregation that says Pastor Josh should go. Now, if you do, then you want to talk to the bishop right away. That's not my sense, though. My sense, from what I've heard from a variety of people, is there's some members that are frustrated with relationships. And if that's the case, then you want to have a mutual ministry committee, personnel committee, who meets with concerned people, and they bring their report to the council.
We know how this works.
Okay, I just want to make sure everybody knows how it works.
Well, I don't know if everybody knows.
So those people on those committees are not council members?
Well, they're not employees, so they probably could be.
Yeah, I mean, mutual ministry committee is often the call committee that called the pastor, carried forward to be a sounding board. Mutual ministry committees are tough cookie, because I want you, if you're on the mutual ministry committee, to do this about the pastor. The mutual ministry committee job is to listen to a variety of people, including staff, including pastor. So they are not council members, they might have council members, they might be appointed by the council, but that's going to be in the Constitution.
Yeah, my thought was, when I hear it said that going through this process of mutual ministry has happened here several times. Yes, that we've done this several times. It makes me pause to think, if we've had to do this several times, maybe what we need to do is some introspection and look at ourselves, and why have we as a congregation felt like we have had to ask questions about our pastors that are here. So that's it.
Say a little bit more about the introspection piece. What are you suggesting?
Well, I
people
just heard
do?
it said that many times we've had to do the mutual ministry. You know, maybe we've been unhappy with our pastoral leadership. And if we have many times had to do that, maybe we need to look at ourselves a little more closely instead of at other people.
To make sure I'm hearing, I think you're saying, are we part of the problem? Okay, all right. I'll be honest, I think we all are. Synod, ELCA, pastors, deacons are a part of the problem. The big question is, can we figure out what the future will look like and get there? I mean, we need to listen to ourselves, listen to others. Doug. I know Doug.
Offer my 2 cents worth.
Now, I've known Doug for 25 years, 30 years.
I'm an old rural farm boy who served in church councils in many different locations and on the Synod Council. My final profession was nonprofit executive director management. Like it or not, we are a nonprofit. So some of these rules or principles apply. And the one that I've seen consistently violated as I sat on church councils, and I've done board trainings, nonprofit board trainings on this. A board of directors / church council is responsible for the legal and fiscal oversight of the operations of the church, not day-to-day operations. That's what they have the pastor and the staff for. It's always been hard for council members who don't understand that principle, and they start getting involved in day-to-day operations, and then the conflict grows. Their responsibility is oversight, legal and fiscal oversight. If you violate that boundary, you eliminate your legal protection as an individual. And no one person of the council has any more power than another person in that council. They may have a different role and responsibility, but no more power. The chair of the council has no more power than just the lay person on that council. And you act as a group. You don't act as individuals. If you act as individuals and you violate the boundary between the council's, the oversight boundary, and get into day-to-day operations, you then make yourself legally liable, personally, and the whole council legally liable in a court of law. Councils struggle with this, not getting involved in day-to-day operations. Good reason for you not to been on the council with all this knowledge you've got of the council, of the congregation. Oh my goodness, go on and on and on and on and on. That's my comment. Should the church secretary sit on a council? Okay, it's okay. But there are times when that church secretary needs to not have a vote. Their salary, for example, or if they're having a conflict with the pastor, because the pastor is the boss of the church staff, not the council. And that got messed up here in Faith years ago. The pastor is the boss of the church staff, not the council chairperson or the council.
Anyway, that's my 2 cents worth, okay?
I'll disagree a little bit with the last statement, Doug. The pastor has oversight of staff, but ultimately it's going to be the council that has direct responsibility.
Hiring authority and direct responsibility.
Yes, yep. The pastor is the one who day after day sees the staff, listens and talks with the staff. So, thank you, Doug. Time to wrap up? Oh, no, Sue.
Thank you, Rollie. I just want to follow up on Barb's comment about how we need to maybe look at ourselves. I've been a member of this congregation since we became Faith Lutheran Church across the street, okay? I go way back here, and I've seen pastors come and go. I could name a lot of them. I could name a lot of them. But here's my concern, and it echoes what you just said. Why has that happened in this congregation over and over and over again? Yes, we need to listen to one another, listen to the issues, whatever, but here's who we need to listen to. The one who brings us together. And where is that in this process? We are the body of Christ. We can have differences. Go back to 1 Corinthians, whatever chapter it is. There are many different gifts and many different talents, and we're all different. I think it's 1 Corinthians
12.
whatever, where Paul is talking to the people at Corinth and saying, what's this I hear about? Some of you are following Apollos, some of you are following this guy, some of you are following that guy, some of you say you're following Christ. But I don't see a lot of evidence of that. He says, get your act together, people. Come together at the foot of the cross. If we have differences, work them out. But keep our eyes on the cross. Who brought us together? Who made us Faith Lutheran? It wasn't people who made us Faith Lutheran. Why are we Faith Lutheran? It has to do with faith. And our only reason for being who we are is to love God and to love others and follow Christ. And that's all I want to say.
Thanks, Sue. Thanks, Sue. If we choose to focus on our differences, that's going to be very divisive. If we focus on what brings us together, what we have in common, Sue said it very clearly with it's faith in God, it's loving God, loving people, that brings us together. Don't tell my wife, she almost came on this trip. I don't always agree with her, right? I mean, we figured out how to disagree, and yet we still love each other for 36 years. Another secret about my wife. Don't tell her this, but I say yes to her a lot because it makes sense, because she's typically more right than I am. And for the sake of unity in our marriage, for the sake of unity in the church, we need to learn to listen, to speak, to work, love, worship, play together. And sometimes we Lutherans, we're not good at that. Oh, this one I love. Karen, I'm looking at your shoes. You know, I don't like Karen's shoes. What should I do? Instead of talking to Karen, I'll go over to Caroline? Carolyn. Did you see the shoes that Karen is wearing? I know. That language, that action is more destructive in the church than should be. If somebody has a complaint against me as a pastor, I would encourage them to come to me if that's too scary, because sometimes pastors can be scary. Bring along a friend. We're talking Matthew 18 stuff. Don't tell your neighbor. Don't, I hate the word gossip, but that's in the New Testament too. Be honest with each other, and I agree with you. Be honest with yourself. Preachers, we've been taught how to talk for hours and hours, and you don't want that. Last question. I want to close in a prayer, but I also want to say, any question, well, I don't want to know if anybody's even watching, because they're probably not. Thank you. Thank you for your commitment, your love, your partnership with one another, including your staff and your pastor and your council. Let us pray. Loving God, we live in situations that aren't always warm and fuzzy, full of love and grace. Lord, help us to see that all of us have certain things that might bother somebody else, that there's poor communication and unwillingness to listen. Overcome all of that with your Holy Spirit, your spirit of love and wisdom and insight. I pray for the leadership of Faith Lutheran Church, that you would be with them, be with their staff, their Pastor Josh, now and into the future. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Lonnie.
Mm-hmm.